in the room. Hope I make it out of here. We ain't stressing about the loot. My block made a case to real.
Hey guys, what's going on? R3 here. This is a build video of how to install the R3D X2R battery system onto the Onewheel Pint. This particular setup will have the 3.5 amp hour battery pack in the rear, fender in the front, and it'll have a voltmeter to monitor battery on the fly. This system will have upgradable options, customizable options, such as like if you wanted to get another battery pack in the front, you can get 3 times the stock range. You can get a fender with the voltmeter built into the front instead of the side. I have actually on my personal board stuff like this. I actually have a speaker in the front if you wanted to get frisky. All that stuff will be posted as I progress with it, and will be posted on the site. Alright guys, without further ado, let's get it built. Alright, first things first, you're going to want to remove the foot pads, front and rear, and the fender delete. These are going to be T20 security bit. Try not to lose any screws. Alright. There's those screws. Your pads off. Flip it back over with the front pad still connected. Make sure you don't lose any screws. Gather all your hardware. And perhaps like I do, get it onto a tray so you don't lose them. Alright. Take off the fender delete cover. And then here for the front pad, you're going to want to pull this off. And then there's a cable connect you want to disconnect. You're going to probably want some pliers to loosen that up. Hold on. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. Okay, got that loose. So it's a connect where you're going to turn it left to unscrew it, and then pull back to pull the front pad off. Awesome. Now you're going to want to take off all the bolts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on the top of the rails. Hold on. I totally forgot something. Be right back. Alright, a little late, better late than never, but since I'm a lazy drone pilot, we have this power driver. Let's see if this works. Alright. 2020, y'all, we buy a Onewheel so you don't have to walk. And I have an electric screwdriver so I don't have to move my wrist, y'all. Alright, now I believe we can take off the side bolts now for the rails. And that is going to be a T30 security bit. And if you'll notice, my buddy actually has some side kicks installed. And these side kicks actually cover the hub bolts. I actually had to cut these out just so I can remove the bolts. But you can do the same if you have these side kicks. Just showing that these side kicks are salvageable, even if you wanted to do the mod, because I know it looks nice and clean covering the hub holes, but unfortunately you're going to have to remove and take everything apart in order to get to the battery bay. Yeah, actually, nope, just kidding. I thought I would have the ability to. Oh, actually, wait. Just because. There we go. Well, bam. Yeah. The 2020, y'all. Let's do the same on the other side. Probably gonna have to crack this off with the ratchet first. Just get that loose. And just because we can. Yeah. This one's funky. Oh man, I actually had to use some muscle there. Oh, heavens forbid. There you go. Alright, at this point, bear with me here. Oh, actually, the bumpers are ready to come off. Let's get the bumpers off. Let's remove the plates. That shouldn't be life easier. There's the side plate, side rail actually. Yeah, that'll come off a lot easier. And then for the hub wheel assembly, you're going to disconnect this connector, again lefty loosey, and then pull out. Okay, now we're going to remove the entirety of the wheel tire assembly. Put that to the side. Okay. And then we should be able to pull this apart. We're gonna leave that side rail on there. We're gonna bolt that back up later anyway, so that's not gonna be too much of a bother doing the mod. So we need to install the extended pack cable on the battery pack portion. Okay, so I'm going to turn this upside down, and I believe the bolts for these are going to be we were using 6-point security bits prior. Now I believe these battery pack ones are 5-point. Yes. So that's a 5-point TS20 security bit. And you can get these bits on Amazon if you don't have it in your collection. Yeah. Yep, front cover comes off. And don't forget, don't lose this rubber seal. Okay. Now, and then the cover for the BMS to where we're going to solder the extended wire to. The bit is a T7 Torx. T7 6-point. Okay, so 2 bolts removed. Be careful not to lose those little bolts. And now we have access to solder on the extended pack leads. Alright guys, I've got my soldering iron out and we're ready to solder on the extended pack lead to the BMS board. And what I've already done actually is I've actually cut a hole right here, ready for the lead to go through. Okay, you can use a drill. Make sure you pull the battery pack out of the way, and let's see if you can wiggle it out. Make sure you get that battery pack out of the way. You don't want to disconnect anything in the BMS battery pack, just for the sake that I think it's keyed to the BMS, and we'd rather leave that alone. So let's go ahead and get the wire lead in there. And as you're passing this through, what you want to do is make sure the negative lead is up. So when we run the wire all the way up to where we're going to solder it, the negative lead is on top and the positive lead, the red one's on the bottom. Okay. So I'll go ahead and fish enough through that I'm going to need. That looks about right. Okay, then I can grab my lead. Now this is a tight fit. But it is a fit. There we go. Okay, so now I've got the perfect amount of room for my wire lead. And as you can see, if I grab the top plate, or the cover for the battery pad, where this is going to sit and the wire is, the grommet resides right here, and then the wire is going to sit right here. There's actually plenty of clearance for the wire lead to be on top of the battery. All right. Now at this point, I am ready to. We're going to connect right here at the XT60 connector, and I'm going to pre-tin these wires. Now I advise definitely have someone that's skillful in soldering, and if not, there's plenty of videos out there, and you definitely want to practice soldering if you feel like your skills aren't ample enough. So what I'm going to do is cover the leads one at a time while I work on them, and that's what I advise you to do, so that we can make sure we're not shorting anything out. And just as a safety precaution, why not, let's go ahead and cover up the surrounding areas, just so that I'm only working and I'm only working with and have the area that I'm gonna solder exposed. Alright, so I got my handy dandy TS100 solder, and I got my solder, and I'm just gonna make sure I'm not touching anything or shorting anything out, and we're gonna pre-tin the connector. Okay, get some solder on there. There you go, that's the moment that I'm looking for, is for the solder to get all nice and melted. Cool, now we've pre-tinned the negative lead. Right now we're ready to solder the negative wire to the negative lead on the BMS pack. Nice, once you've got a really solid weld, then you're good to go. Just like so. Okay, got one lead down, and then just the positives to go. So I'm actually going to remove the tape. Alright, for a little sustainability, let's reuse this tape to cover up the areas that we're not going to touch, we're not going to want to touch, or shouldn't touch rather. Or this positive lead is going to run this way like so, and then connect right there. There we go. It's always satisfying, that moment when the solder actually melts. Okay, and then we're going to join that right there like so. Looking for a nice flowy joint for this connection. I think we've got it. Alright. Make sure you're not shorting anything out, obviously. Don't put too much solder, and we should be good to roll. Since I've got my connections finished, I'm going to grab my hot glue gun. There we go. Again, this is just totally unnecessary by any means, because stock, the connectors are exposed. But because we're modding things and we already have this open, we're going to be extra careful. And we might as well protect ourselves. I'm going to leave my hot glue gun connected and turned on, because we are going to use hot glue to seal up the whole area right over here. Hot glue fuzz. Okay, then at this point I can fix exactly how much wire I'm going to have out and tuck that in nicely on the side of the battery pack. Okay, because the leads are going to run like so. This positive lead is going to be right here, and this negative lead is going to run right here, right alongside this connector. Now, as far as the cover goes, we're going to need to make a cut from here to here. Open this area up so it has enough space for the wire to pass through up here and right here. Okay, so I'm actually just going to use my side cutters and open up that hole. Maybe open it up a little bit more. And cool, that should work. Okay, then I'm going to put my cover back on. There we go. And grab my screws. My T7 driver. It's right here. Okay, let's get the screw in. Screws. Cool. Before I even put the top cover on, while our hot glue gun is hot, let's go ahead and seal up the battery case from the hole we made in the wire lead. So I'm actually going to do one side first. So you can never have enough hot glue, as my friend Russell would say. Okay, what you do want to make sure is that you have enough hot glue so that there's a watertight seal surrounding the hole and the wire. Cool. We'll let that cool down, solidify, while I install the gasket and the top cover to our battery pack. You want to make sure the gasket is perfectly lined up and seated correctly before we seal it back up. So put our top cover on. All good. Cool. There you go. And then I'm going to give it a minute to let this hot glue cool down. But we have a good joint. And yeah, this should be nice and sealed. Ready to put back together. Alright, actually, before we get the board back together and screw it all up, let's go ahead and verify that our connection is good. And we're going to connect. I got my handy dandy voltmeter. I'm going to verify that I do indeed have correct voltage and connection to the BMS pack. Okay, now we can put the pint back together so that we can install the X2R battery pack system. I'm using the electric driver right now, guys, but since we're tightening everything back up, we definitely want to make sure to go back over it manually, hand torque it so that everything is nice and tight. Especially you want to make sure that gasket has a good compression on it. And let's torque it just like you were torquing the head or valve cover on a motor. Let's go ahead and cross pattern. Make sure we get a nice even torque distribution so everything sits flat. So we have a good seal on our battery pack. if you had a pint that works with the VNR and RNR, the older firmware, then you can rely on the app for your battery voltage and telling you the correct mileage that you have left. But if you're like me, my buddy over here that has the Gemini 5050 firmware, and the app doesn't no longer works correctly to tell you battery life and how much mileage left, then we're going to take this apart to install the voltmeter and attach 2 wires to run the power leads right here so we can power the voltmeter. For now, I'm going to put it together. Alright guys, we've got our pint back together for the most part, and we're almost there, almost ready to install the X2R system. So in order for the wire lead to connect correctly and to line up correctly with the fender pack, we're actually going to line up the fender battery with the fender delete and make sure your pint is facing forward. This guard is actually mounted towards the front of the pint, okay? And then I'm going to take a marker and line up, make a little line just so I know where I want my extended battery lead to end up, which will be right here. There we go, we've got our line. So I'm going to go take this and make my cut so that the wire will end up right here. Alright guys, so I'm back and I made the cut I needed to make to have the battery extended lead line up correctly for the battery pack. So let's go ahead and install the fender delete. Just going to drop in there like so. Alright, so now as far as this battery pack goes, and the pint is fully charged. This battery pack, I actually fully charged this myself, so these can be plugged in. We definitely do not recommend plugging in a battery that's more than 20% different than the stock battery on the pint. So now that I know that these batteries are similar in voltage, I can go ahead and plug this in. Sweet. Then I can go ahead and screw everything together. But first, let me show you guys how this connects. And then actually on the sidewall of the fenders in here, that's actually where this wire for your battery pack and your extended lead will tuck in nicely for a nice stealth, smooth looking install. Matching front fender. Check this out. Yeah, Pint X2R. Alright people, so if your Pint was hardware version 5300 and firmware 5042, then if you wanted to use your app to rely on voltage, then you are totally fine. You don't need a voltmeter. This guy is ready to rock. Over 2 times the range of stock. But if you're like me and my buddy over here, and your Pint was firmware version 5050, and you didn't want to rely on your app, because the only value in the app that's actually correct is going to be voltage to base off how much battery life you have left, then you're going to want something like this on the fly so that you don't have to use the app. And you can monitor your voltage to guesstimate how much remaining voltage you have left. Basically, when I go on rides, I ride till I'm at the 50% mark, which tends to be around the 55 volt mark for this battery system. Then that tells me I have 50% left. I can either recharge if I'm going to go longer distance, or I head back to my start destination. But as far as installing the X2R system and not needing battery monitoring system, then you're good to go. So after this, I'm going to go ahead and proceed to take off the front pad so we can access the control box module, so we can install the wire lead so that we can monitor the voltage of the entire system. Alright guys, so in order to install the voltmeter, we're going to need to tap into the main control box and grab the power leads off of the control box. So the cool thing about it is that you don't need to take apart the whole pint to get access to the control box. So where we're going to tap power for this mod is going to be right here, again at the XC60 connector. Alright guys, so what we're going to need to do for this install is actually we need to route the wire through the top of the control board cover. The nice thing is we actually don't need to drill anything because there's this little sticker seal right here that already has a hole. So all we actually need to do is take a piece of scissor or something sharp, just poke a hole in there, and then I'm including some Flex Seal tape to cover that connection up after we route the wire. And what I've already done is actually I've pre-tinned the power leads here, and these leads actually only get power once the board is turned on. Hence the voltmeter is only going to be on when the board is on. So I'm going to go ahead and actually solder these to the connector. And again, oh, don't be like me. Make sure your board's off. Alright guys, we got a good connection there. And again, like we did before, just to be uber safe, uber careful, and we're going to get the handy dandy glue gun out and just secure the wires. What I have noticed, and especially why the solder on the board actually takes quite a while to melt, is because there's a little bit of conformal coating on the board, which is an awesome thing because that's kind of like badgering from the factory. At least that's what I'm noticing on the pint. Alright, so now I can pull my lead slack. And before you put the cover back on entirely, make sure the gasket, oopsie, just like that, is fully seated in the recession. So what I'm going to do is when I put the door on, I want to check the seal. And make sure I can actually, the nice thing is that this cover is transparent, so you can actually see the gasket is in the groove where it's supposed to be. Okay, go over everything, make sure we're all nice and hand tight to ensure a good seal for your control board. Good to roll. And then at this point I'm going to actually verify that the voltmeter does actually engage when it's powered on. And there we go. Okay, at this point what you're going to want to do to make sure you close that hole we made earlier is actually take that Flex Seal tape and actually we're going to do it this way. I'm going to make sure this is some really strong stuff, guys. Oh, there we see it. There. And good to go. And I'm going to make sure to apply pressure in all of the creases just to ensure we have a good seal. I'm actually going to get another piece. There we go. Okay, and like I said earlier, I've actually measured this wire to be the correct length so that you can route this like so, because your foot pad basically sits on top of this, and it's going to route this way to the voltmeter. And actually I had a couple zip ties just to be absolutely sure. Yeah, I said that. So around the big cable that goes alongside this rail, you're going to put the zip ties in between. I'm just going to put 2 just as a double safety to ensure that this wire doesn't have any chance of running into a tire. Like I said, I measured it so... Shut up, Alexa. So I've measured it so that when you route this wire to the voltmeter, it really has no chance to run into the tire. Okay, but what I'm going to do with more Flex Seal tape is tape the wire in place above the control board, so we have the wire running exactly where we want it. Okay, so like I said, move this wire here, like so, and then we're going to tape this bad boy right there. Some sticky stuff, yo. That's what she said. There she goes. And then now I got my wire running in between the rail and the cable right here. And I'm going to go ahead and zip tie the wire in place. Might need some tweezers to grab the other end of the zip. I think I just lost the zip tie, but anyway. Wires. There we go. Get a couple clicks in. There we go. Right there. Where did my second zip tie go? Oh, it's right there still. Sweet. Let's grab the other end, the zip. Around the wire, against the cable that's inside the rail. Close that zip up. Like a toiga. Let's use pliers. There you go, a couple clicks. Run that along the side closer to the hub. And then be very careful as you cut the extra of the zip tie. Boom, out of sight, out of mind. And then now at this point I got this wire ready for the voltmeter to be right here. Let's put the rest of this back together. Alright guys, so the board's back together. We're ready to secure the voltmeter to the side. And for this particular build for my buddy, because he didn't want the front voltmeter, and just in case he decides to add another battery pack on the front, he could. So that's why we installed the voltmeter on the side. On this particular build, I installed some threaded inserts onto the fender delete by drilling holes and then pressing in the 3mm brass insert so that we can install this with screws. But in this holder, there's actually some slots for some zip ties. If you just wanted to zip this around the rail, you can do that too, just to be secure, or you can do both. Let's go ahead and screw this into place like so, nice and clean. your Pint X2R is basically ready to rock. And then let's power it on. And we're good to roll. This board's actually flipped that way because my buddy rides Goofy. So this is for a Goofy setup. So at a glance, he can actually look at his voltage and his battery while he's riding. Alright guys, enjoy.
Keep the pistol on the side.